Hi, my name is Dave Reske, and welcome to this edition of Marketing in the Now, where we talk about the best ideas in marketing. And my guest today is Tim Hamelen, the CMO of iDesign. Tim was a marketing leader at Posty and Science Mold before this gig. And Tim, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me, David.
Really appreciate you being here. You've had a lot of experience in marketing over the years, and you and I have been talking about a topic that is super important to a lot of our listeners, and that is combining online and offline funnel optimization. And why don't you tell our listeners even what that means? What
Well,
is that
I
all
mean,
about?
okay, so it starts with the way that stores used to be purchased and set up, right? Retail was set up in a very specific way. Online came and online set up things in a very uh, unique way as well. The way that a prospective customer would go through your website, all right? That's the current UI UX that we live by. Because you are optimizing that funnel on that front end now digitally, and we are following the best the market trends, the everything that you would call a best practice. Um, that's not where it stops. So once you have acquired, whether that's a lead or a purchase or a free trial or what have you, that's not where your funnel optimization stops. And in the early days, that is where your funnel optimization stopped. The lowest cost per lead, the lowest cost per acquisition. Try to get them in as low as possible. And as time has gone by, we've realized that there's a certain amount of effort that needs to go into the lifetime value. So you might not acquire the customer for as low as possible, but it is a qualified customer with a higher average order value and a much longer lifetime value. Now, how did you determine that? What are the steps that you took to, look at that data? And then how did you formulate a plan to go back after those specific types of customers rather than what we would call spray and pray? This is much more of a focused laser-like effort. Now, that's not the, and go ahead, David. You
Yeah, so I was
can
just going to
stop me.
say that there's a lot there. Let me just try to unpack that with you for a little bit. So you're kind of saying back in the day, like in the beginning of e-commerce, especially retailers kind of had two separate paths for their customers, right? There was
Absolutely.
the traditional marketing path where they're doing things to bring people into the stores, and then there's the e-commerce path. And in the e-commerce path, you're saying that was really the marketing there was all about driving that initial traffic, getting them into the e-commerce funnel and then measuring everything by the transaction itself, right?
That last click transaction, that initial transaction, and then
Yeah.
basing all of your marketing campaigns on the performance of that very small life cycle.
So
We'll
what?
call it.
So tell me, take me back in the day, 10 years ago when you were executing those
This
campaigns.
is 20 years ago, but go
20
ahead.
years
Yeah.
ago, right? So what was wrong with that? What's wrong with just like, hey, I paid this much, I got this many customers, this is great, and I'm making money, and what's wrong with that model?
Well, there's a certain amount of pain you are putting on other parts of your company, whether that's the brand for returns or cancellations or things like that, because you are acquiring customers for a reason, for a specific messaging, a value prop, a key differentiator. They're coming in, but they're not. This is not the right customer, and so you're putting pressure on your brand because the majority of your customers are not the right customer, and now your brand thinks that your brand is not correct for the majority of your customers, but they're not the right customers. And so now you have pressure on brand. You have pressure on customer service. You are putting an exponential amount of pressure on your customer service because they're answering and dealing with customers that may not have understood the product offering, may not have understood the purchase, the subscription model, whatever it is, whatever they were trying to do. Um, that's a fair amount of pressure, and both of that pressure moves up, and then it moves back down to marketing again. So if you are if you are not if you're only focusing on driving the least the most amount of customers at the least amount of value, you are taking one gigantic thing out of the equation, which is the core of your brand, which is where you started. What are we trying to sell and who are we trying to sell it to, rather than trying to hit a top line revenue number as fast as humanly possible. And we've done that. And I've done that with so many startups. Try to shoot up as fast as possible. But then when you find out is that your tail is just, it's detrimental to your overall company narrative.
So,
Higher ed did this. Higher ed
yeah.
did this 15 years ago, right? Get me as many leads as you can. I don't care how you get them. I don't care. Get them. And now your call center is calling people that may or may not remember that they clicked on 7 universities. You are putting pressure on a team that already has a fair amount of pressure on them. You know, the KPIs of a call center are they far outweigh most KPIs of any other part of the organization. So that is what I'm referring to. If you go out and you are just trying to acquire, there was a tipping point, and it was about maybe 2013 where we realized we can keep going this way, but we will only continue to put pressure on lowering the acquisition cost and pushing more into the funnel and being inefficient
You,
as a business.
so in essence, you're kind of forcing under that model, you're forcing marketing in order to keep their jobs and keep things going. You're forcing them to optimize on the wrong thing, which is that initial sale, the initial lead, rather than the lifetime value of the customer and really getting the right kind of customers.
That's correct. And they don't always have to be, hand raisers. You can go to somebody that may not be in the market for your product and acquire them. That's not to say that you have to focus solely on the single persona that you have developed prior to product launch. Other personas will come about through the data. And at that point, it's time to take a step back and realize, hey, listen, we can have a foundation of this type of customer, but they're always going to be the lowest LTV. Great. We know that we can keep this marketing channel going, but we really need to focus on this marketing channel because we're getting the most qualified prospective customer, prospective student, whatever that is, that then is creating efficiency for our customer service, our call center, our distribution center, so on and so forth.
So in that model, it seems like the most important thing is to understand what is your best customer
Correct.
and really focusing on that. In your experience in higher ed, how did you describe that best customer? What was the
Well, now
best
now
customer?
higher ed is the okay. There's two different types of life cycles, right? And the life cycle of somebody in higher ed could be 12 months or it could be 4 years.
Hmm.
And there are numerous variables that occur during the life cycle of a student that cannot be controlled by any process.
Mhm.
Um, Funding, family emergency, name it, right?
Mhm.
Okay. That takes you out of understanding, because, and also you're not putting 10,000 widgets out there. You're usually about 100. So your statistical significance is already behind the eight ball.
Mhm.
And then your time to confidently project lifetime value is also very long. So you can make decisions early in the process if you do not give that life cycle long enough that could be detrimental 1 year down the road and you
Mhm.
would not know it. And so it became very, very important to us that we used the early direct response methods of acquiring the customer, of getting the customer, of working the customer digitally, but then it was an entirely different process post. It needed to be more of a concierge effort and less of a got you, move on. So less of a conveyor belt and more of a hand holding.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Take me into maybe for our listeners, just generalize that a little bit into maybe B2B marketing or other
Oh,
B2C markets, because it seems like it's easy, what you're saying, your examples in higher ed, seems like it can extrapolate directly into other, retail channels or in B2B marketing, where people are focused on that initial lead, lowest cost per lead, and not focused on that long-term customer lifetime value.
I empathize with salespeople because where do you get your leads? I've spent my entire career on the purchase side. So for 25 years, I have taken phone calls or cold calls or cold emails umpteen times a day. You're in marketing, you know this. You've gone through a bazillion of them, and I empathize with their plight They there's a certain amount that have to go cold, the SDR in the world, and there's a certain amount that get the leads. But where do they get the leads from? And how are those leads derived? And are they going to be right for their business? And how much time do they have to put into it? This is something that we look at very closely in our business at iDesign because higher ed, which is predominantly our customer base, is a finite market, specifically US based, which is where we are positioned. So it's not like new higher ed companies are popping up all the time. And so when we are looking at servicing one of these higher ed companies, how do you do it? How do you get to the decision maker? How do you move them? And how do you know it's the right time to move them? You don't. You never will. So your best bet is again not to spray and pray. Spray and pray to me is email, even if it is the most targeted email list of all time, and you got it from everybody, and they all opted in. You're still going to get a battle at 20% open rate,
Mm-hmm.
and it's going to be hard. But what other way do you have to go about finding the correct target for your biz dev team or your marketing team to reach that person to funnel into the biz dev team? It's becoming harder and harder because of the saturation of so many different um, SaaS tools or different services that can be offered to higher ed. And to cut through that noise, we find that when we speak at a conference, we have individuals on our staff. Now, this is an outlier, but we have individuals that are on our C-suite and founders that are well known in the industry. They would be asked to speak at any conference. So that puts us at a little bit of an advantage
Mm-hmm.
in terms of how we generate our front end B2B. But if I were to take those individuals out of the equation, we still generate a fair amount of leads for the B2B individuals that do not have that Rolodex or that cachet when they walk into a marketing event or a conference. But it's about that same thing. I can hit 1,000 individuals every day and get one engagement. Am I doing the right thing? Am I being efficient? I'm not. Somebody, whether it's my marketing person, my copywriter, my CRM manager, the biz dev person that's chasing those leads, somebody is doing something where they could be more efficient on something else.
Mm.
And so what we have found is singular engagement, not necessarily from the one-to-one biz dev, but a singular engagement from a micro-targeting perspective. If I know that you have a university that is this type and you have these types of programs, but you do not have this, well, then that seems like a great target. How many more are like that? Great. Now build an audience, very small. Now, can we do micro campaigns through LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Google? Like, where can we reach just those individuals?
Powerful.
That's how we're doing it now. Sorry, apologies.
Yeah, no, and we'll get more into that kind of conversation. But I want to take us back a little bit to like connecting the dots between that initial lead and the lifetime value of the customer. So it seems like that's core to making this work, right? So you've got to really understand, the what you call the spray and pray method, where you're just really getting a lot of leads at the lowest cost, and understanding the lifetime value. How do you connect those dots? How do you make sure you're kind of working both of those together?
From a marketing standpoint, you cannot, whatever your initial campaigns and the optimization, whatever the performance is throughout that first 6 months, whatever that is, all that is a benchmark,
Hmm.
right? And that's how we have to look at it as a benchmark because we'll use round numbers. Let's say I'm acquiring customers for $100 because the hypothesis is that their lifetime value is $200.
Hmm.
Okay, somewhere in there, I'm going to get a 60% margin if I take my COGS out. All right, but after a year, I find out they're really $40, but I've been spending at $100. That's detrimental to the business and probably should have been caught at an earlier time because the marketing could have done numerous things on the front end. And then on the back end, we could have done things to support the issues that were driving the lifetime value down. If there is not a symbiotic relationship between the data of the customers post-purchase and that front-end marketing team, you will always find animosity and you will never find a true working dialogue or a dialogue loop. that works for everyone. Um, and once you do kind of find that perfect symbiotic relationship, man, it's great. It's fantastic because you're sharing data. They want to know what people are looking at on the page. How long did they stay there? Okay, that's great. Oh, we found that customer service or reviews are focusing on this. Can we put this in the? Oh, that's great data. Like that kind of energy is infectious, and then everybody wants to get in on it.
Yeah. Yeah, and that becomes really powerful. But it sounds like you've got to have that data integration. You've got to connect the dots data wise between all your marketing spend, the leads that are coming in, the opportunities, and the revenue, right? All the way through. And
Right?
that's a big challenge for a lot of companies making that happen. But like you say, once you understand that and you can tune the campaigns to be most efficient and effective.
I find that when people are initially trying to determine which KPIs are going to be the most successful across, they are too finite,
Hmm.
where they should be at a much higher level. And then once you've determined those higher levels, then you start to become more finite within those levels. I call it death by paper cut. If you're waiting for if you're making decisions on all these little finite levels and you're moving around, you're just never going to know. And eventually you're going to.
By finite levels, do you mean like the kind of the all the metrics that you get from all these marketing systems? You're making decisions.
Marketing systems or return rates, chargebacks. Like I'm taking everything into account now.
Yeah.
Application denials from fintech perspective, a lack of FICO score, things like that, right? If you're not working with that relationship and the triggers are not there, like you were talking about, what can you put into place? So on the front end, the easy things are what can I control to make sure that I'm limiting my liability from a marketing spend? And on the back end, how can I control my products to be the best experience for the customer? What are the data loops that we need to generate those flags to give learnings to both sides? And in most cases, you have to, as a company, you have to come, there's no open a box and this is perfect for this and this is perfect for that. Some people find for their job that Salesforce might be right. Some people might find that HubSpot might be right. It's just it's a feel, but you need to be focused on all of these key business attributes because it's more than just marketing and funneling and getting customers in and keeping customers and all of that. It's your brand, it's your business, it's everything that goes into it. And if you are not tracking everything that you can, even if you're only reporting at the highest level, then you're going to fall into the same pitfalls that people fall into over and over again historically. In 2000, when it went to poop, everything the stock market crashes because everybody was spending marketing money and nobody was tracking anything.
Mm.
In 2000 and what was it? 2014 with the mobile app, boom. And then the VCs dumping money. And then they came back and they were like, how much revenue are you making? And the mobile app said, revenue, right? So it's a cyclical process, but it always comes back to the same thing.
Yeah.
Where is that symbiotic relationship between front end and back end?
And now we really do have the tools where we can measure that, connect all the dots, whether it's B2B or B2C. We can connect the dots between campaigns, campaign results, leads, opportunities, and revenue. And you're saying that you've got to have that. But I want to talk about something else you mentioned, which is these integrated micro campaigns.
Okay.
Because it sounds like once you have all that data, you can start to create campaigns for small audiences that are not just a single thing. It's not like you just do an email blast to these 25 people or 2,500 people. You're talking about email integrated with social, integrated with advertising, integrated with
PPC.
yeah,
I mean,
right,
it's
offline. Talk
becoming.
to me about creating or thinking about how you structure those kind of integrated micro campaigns.
I don't. We changed the mindset from bidding on the placement or the keyword to bidding on the individual or the
Mm,
prospective client. And it's a different way of thinking about things. And it's not necessarily that you are trying to put as many attributes on top subjectively to try to get down to this, sub 10 audience. Because in some cases, that sub 10 audience will never run. It's not effective for whichever partner you are running for from effective CPM standpoint. You're not going to pay $5,000 CPM on that. And so your audience will never run. So how can you do it to be effective? And what it ends up being is that you can use things like simple geofencing. You can use things like um, a simple postcard. I know it's crazy, but a postcard that has a handwritten statement on it can go further today than an email could 5 years ago.
Hmm.
And it's I don't know what it is. When they told me they were going to do it, I told them they were crazy. But it's the counterintuitive that always seems to play through because it's not the most used tactic of that time. So the
Hmm.
micro targeting is not necessarily trying to focus on Tom, Bill, Janet, Susie. It's trying to focus on 10 individuals that fit this type within this type of business. So it's a
Hmm.
little bit different. I allow the algorithm to find other audience members. I just don't use them.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. You've got to do that fine targeting. One of the campaigns that we're types of campaigns that we're running right now might be like, like in a Google search, right? It's a campaign. You don't always have in B2B, you don't always have the fine targeting
Right.
that you need, but you get those leads that come in, then we can identify people on the website through data tools, and then we can micro market to them via email, via LinkedIn outreach, and then through adding those to other groups within remarketing lists. So that's one way, taking, lists of people, but getting lists from who's already responded, people with high intent that come in, and then you already know these people are interested, and then we want to connect with them, in multiple ways and call them, right? So if you call,
And
social, outreach through further advertising and email, you've touched them, in this example in four different ways. But
if
it's
you
all
have
groups.
enough of them, you can create small little lookalike audiences as well, too, dependent on which of the social platforms that you use, which I find to be successful if you know what you're looking for. Some of the social platforms will stack the deck and give you individuals that are more apt to click or more apt to submit a lead form. So you have to be very um, focused on what your goal is and how fast they are reaching that goal.
Yeah. I think what you're talking about once you do one of these integrated micro campaigns is you've got to be an expert in advertising, right? So because you have all these advertising options, you can do Google or LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok, whatever, right? So you got all these ad channels. Plus, there's a lot of industry specific channels you could be using, and then you've got social channels you could be doing. You could be doing outreach, email. I could go on and on. How does a small marketing team these days become experts in all these different channels and execute all these things? Are we talking about a lot of labor to execute all this, or how do we develop the expertise to really run these micro,
They're not,
campaigns?
none of the platforms are so different that an individual that has a high level of competency in one cannot learn the other one quickly.
Hmm.
There are semantic differences, sure, great. The one wants to name one something this, and they want to name something that. I tell every individual that I've ever hired, go in there, learn it, and break it. Break
Hmm.
it today. Break it, find how it's broken, then rebuild it, do it again. Then let's launch. And by the time they're done, then I want to learn.
Hmm.
Okay, now you're going to teach me. Now I'm going to be able to teach everybody else. So I find an acolyte first. Then I send that little acolyte out, and then then the learnings go around to everyone, and then you have to get in there and you have to play. The hypothesis of knowing the platform and actually utilizing the platform are two completely separate things. You know this. The data that you're going to get back, the levers that you can pull afterwards, you don't know until you're like knee deep in it. And the only way you can learn is if you're knee deep in it. So
Yeah.
then which are the ones that are important? Hey, TikTok's got a new store. Should we be on that TikTok store? I don't know. I don't
Hmm.
know. I can't answer that. Can you answer that? Your competitors there. Maybe we should look into it. Legwork, right? Just simple steps.
Yeah, and then use what obviously works best. So we've just have got a few minutes left, and I know you've been talking about optimizing marketing campaigns on the lifetime value of the customer versus the spray and pray, or these early methods about just optimizing on clicks or traffic, those kinds of things. What is the net impact to a marketing organization or the company when you do that? If you're successful, kind of transitioning this, what's the impact on the company?
You have to, well, let's back up because when you make that determination, the amount of pressure that it puts on the customer acquisition cost is very, very shocking to everyone that looks at data. And so you really have to spend time to teach someone or a group, this is the way it's going to be. This is the time it's going to take to get there. And then for your job's sake, you had better project within a certain, level of variance because it is important. Otherwise, they think you're just spending to spend and you're not converting.
Hmm.
To be able to show progress and scalability is a grind. You know this, right? Like it is a grind. I've met many high level individuals that say, one specifically told me that my way of working was like climbing up the stairs and jumping out the window every day. And I would get up with a broken leg and I'd go and I'd jump out again. And then I have another broken leg. And I'd get up and I'd jump up the third day and I didn't break any legs, so I might be okay. I could never explain to him that that's not the way. It's more like baseball. If I can get three slap singles, that's going to give me enough confidence to get the triple or the home run. I don't have to hit a home run every time,
Yeah.
right? Iterative, iterative optimization is necessary to get to the next step of anything.
Yeah, iterative optimization. But I think what you're saying is iterative optimization on the right goal, right? And
On the
that's so important. I think that's critical to your thesis here is really if you iteratively optimize on the wrong goal, you're screwed. But if you optimize on the right goal and then create these micro campaigns that are around integrated sets of the best customer that you really want, you could be really successful. But it's going to take a transition. Maybe if you were doing it the old way, it's going to transition in leadership expectations, budget
oh,
allocation, campaigns, expertise on the team, all of that to kind of get yourself into that new way of thinking,
your
right?
sales, your distribution, everybody has to be in line. And when you're scaling, they all have to be in line. So it's, transparency and communication are very impactful.
Yeah, but it's a massive transformation, a business transformation if an organization wants to get there.
It really is.
Yeah. Tim, this has been a fascinating conversation. You've done this many times, you're very successful. If some of our listeners want to talk more with you about how you've done this or some of your experience, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
They can reach out to me on LinkedIn. That's easy. Or I'm at tim.hamelen, spelling is weird, down below at iDesignEDU.org.
That's great. And we'll put that in the show notes as well. So
Awesome.
Tim, thanks for joining us today. I really appreciate your time.
Thanks a lot, David. Appreciate it.